Hello, I am here today to welcome the 64th president of the American College of Sports Medicine, Dr. NiCole Keith, as part of the ACSM Distinguished Leaders in Sports Medicine and Exercise Science series. Welcome, Dr. Keith.
Thank you, Sean. Good to see you.
Good to see you as well. Dr. Keith was first interviewed for this project in 2012. We are interviewing Dr. Keith now as part of a special series within a series focusing on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Let me start by saying president of the American College of Sports Medicine. Just by saying that, I think it is a tremendous honor to you and to all the great work that you've done. But then when I say the 64th president of ACSM, and I add in the fact that you are Black, the first Black president, my first thought is, that has taken a long time. Can you first just share with us what it has been like for you as president of ACSM this past year?
Well, I think it's been challenging for everyone just because of the pandemic. But I wanted to add, Sean, that it's not just that I'm the first Black president of ACSM. I'm the first president of ACSM who isn't white. So we have a lot of work to do in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion within our top leadership, within our executive leadership. But to answer your question, it's been kind of great that I live in Indianapolis and the National Center is in Indianapolis, just right across the street from where my office is.
A 7-minute walk?
It's a 7-minute walk. That's exactly right. And I think it's been beneficial. We have a new CEO in Kristen Bellison. She's new to the city of Indianapolis. And for me to be able to welcome Kristen to our city and to deliver board meetings from the National Center, even though they've been virtual. The staff has come to the National Center at a safe physical distance to help support me lead these meetings. And it's been quite a blessing that the 64th president of ACSM during a pandemic happened to live in Indianapolis. We've accomplished a lot over the past year despite our challenges.
I think it has been quite a blessing indeed, where a leader of our organization could have come from anywhere, and yet 7-minute walk to the campus from her office has just been very phenomenal for ACSM standpoint to have a leader so close. So I just wanted to thank you for that. Let's begin with a little bit of background, Dr. Keith. I believe your mom was in academia. Did she play a role in inspiring you to get an advanced degree? And then what first inspired you to get into the field of exercise science, sports medicine?
Sure. So absolutely, she inspired me. When I was little, she took me to the classes that she taught. She was a professor of psychology. And then she became, well, I should back up a little bit. I was 7 years old when she got her Ph.D. So I happened to be there and witness her getting a Ph.D. She was the first Black woman to get a Ph.D. from her institution, and they made a really big deal about it when she got hooded. And I just remember how happy she was, how happy everybody on stage was, and it looked really cool. And I thought, I think I want to do that. And then she used to take me to classes, and I would see her engage with her students and the great conversations that they would have. And then she became the dean of students at what was then Grand Valley State College, which is now Grand Valley State University. But the students loved her and were in and out of her office all the time, and I saw her shaping lives and her interactions with her colleagues, and I just thought, what a cool job she had. And so absolutely, she influenced my desire to work in academia. My parents were also really inspirational in helping me select the field of exercise science. And this also goes back to when I was a child. We lived in Grand Rapids, Michigan. My parents are from Chicago, and they come from fairly large families. So I had lots of cousins and aunts and uncles, and we would visit. And as I got older, so in my teenage years, I started noticing that even though my parents were the youngest, both of them were the youngest of their siblings, they seemed to be aging more slowly than my aunts and uncles. Likewise, my cousins didn't seem to be as healthy as my brother and I were. And I started noticing that education and income are a huge influence, and so socioeconomic status is a big deal when it comes to health outcomes. I also, at that point, I decided that I really wanted to go to school to study health outcomes and healthy behaviors. I think that the exercise science part started a little bit later when I was in my Ph.D. at the University of Connecticut, that I knew exercise would improve health outcomes, but I didn't understand until we did a study with the Department of Defense. And we enrolled college students who were women, and we put them through what would equate to basic training. And I saw these women transform over a 6-month period to people who were like soldiers. And they were not confident, then they became very confident. They became really great students. And I saw what training could do for health outcomes, but also for confidence and academic performance, and all of these other outcomes that are positive from participating in physical activity. And that's how I knew this is what I want to do for the rest of my life.
Well, I can tell you, I think you looking at your mom as a role model, I can almost see you being a role model to many student members of our organization right now who you don't even know, who look up to you and say, maybe I can become president of ACSM as a result of the work that you've done. So it's just fantastic. Why did you initially get involved in ACSM? How did that come about?
So I think for many people, it's as a student. And so I was a student at the University of Rhode Island, and I was working in cardiac rehab, and the nurse who was in charge of cardiac rehab told us that we had funding to go to ACSM. It was in Seattle that year. And so we all went. And then after that, we just went every year. Even when I got to UConn, there was funding available, and we were encouraged to go to ACSM. We volunteered to reduce the cost of participating in the annual meeting. But that's, it became a tradition. We started meeting other students. I was the New England student rep at the time, and so I got to meet other student reps, and I just remained involved. It's such a great organization where you can meet a diverse group of professionals who are participating in a team to keep people healthy. The science is excellent. You learn so much. Back then, the presentations were really exciting because people would debate during the Q&A. It doesn't happen anymore. It would be terrifying, I think, right now. But back then, the scientists would argue, and it was just so much fun to watch these brilliant minds have disagreement with scientific outcomes, but then at the end come together for a beer and be friends. So it's a great organization. It's expanding, but just really lots of opportunities to basically change the world.
I believe when you first became a member of ACSM, it would be fair to say that there was a lack of diversity in our organization. When you go to national meetings now, from your lens, what has changed since then?
So yes, while there was great professional diversity, there is a lack of racial ethnic diversity and other kinds of diversity that we care about. Most of the people were pretty homogeneous. And where I just said that there was an opportunity for change, we did make a change with the creation of the Leadership and Diversity Training Program. And as you know, Sean, because you're a great mentor for that program, it's to help underrepresented minorities engage in membership and leadership for ACSM. And we have had over 150 individual participants, and many participants have become fellows, and almost all of them sit on an ACSM committee, and several have been elected to their regional chapter boards or to the National Board of Trustees. And a couple of years ago, Chris Sawyer, who's the Director of Membership and Marketing and the staff person who is the liaison for this program, said to me, I feel so bad because I don't know all of the leadership and diversity training program participants. And I said, that's a great problem to have, because that means the program has gotten so big that we can't recognize all of the past participants. The other thing is, when you see somebody who looks like you see yourself in that position. And so, as you know, when we go to annual meeting, the diversity, the racial ethnic diversity within annual meeting is huge. And I think a lot of it has to do with so many of our former participants are still, leadership and diversity training program participants are still engaged and are inviting others with racial ethnic diversity to come to the table. I also think that there are lots of opportunities nationally for faculty members to recruit underrepresented minorities to come and work in their labs or their clinic, or to pursue a Ph.D. with them. And these are also ACSM members who have a commitment to diversity and are recruiting people into their schools, and we're seeing them appear at the annual meeting as well.
So I believe there's 50,000 ACSM members and certified professionals. And what you just described was a top-down structure of leadership trying to present diversity in a manner to help out our organization. My question to you is, how could an ACSM member or a certified professional play a role in trying to further address inequality and underrepresentation in healthcare and fitness?
So beyond what I just said, and that is recruiting underrepresented minorities to come and work in their labs, to come to join their faculty, to make available other faculty positions, and it's up to the university typically, but to give incentives to hire underrepresented minorities is really important. But that's not something that all ACSM members can control. What we can control is our own minds. And so when we start thinking about who's going to be on this committee, who are we going to invite to this talk, it's really important to have at the forefront of our minds every time we make a decision, are we making it in the interest of diversity, equity, and inclusion? And what I like to explain to people is that sometimes it's about race or age or ability or country of origin or fill in the blank demographic, but sometimes it's about thought. And so sometimes I say, a white guy like Sean Walsh thinks about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and so we need to have him at the table. So it can't just be for optics, it has to be for action. And so we can't assume that everybody who's a racial ethnic minority is going to be concerned about diversity, equity, and inclusion. We all have to think about it at the forefront of our minds every time we make a decision.
That's fantastic. I'm going to take a step back and talk about your student years, which I don't think were terribly that long ago. Who were your mentors, and what role did they play in your professional development? And were you able to think about diversity during this time? For instance, I believe your doctoral advisor was Dr. Larry Armstrong, now past President Armstrong, someone who has been a strong proponent of diversity, especially in the New England chapter of the American College of Sports Medicine. He started a minority scholarship, which I believe you were the first recipient of back in 1992. From a diversity standpoint, what were you able to learn from these mentors in becoming a new professional?
Well, I'm going to go back to undergrad, and I attended undergrad at Howard University. And Doris Corbett was my mentor, and she was a faculty member in the Department of Physical Education. She also happened to be a board member of the United States Olympic Committee, and she also was the president of the American Alliance of Health, Physical Education, Recreation, and Dance, what now Shape America. And so I understood really early in my undergraduate years the importance of leadership. And she was a Black woman, and to see a Black woman who was president of AFERD, I knew it was possible for me to be president of a professional organization as well. And she really groomed me to do public speaking, to be a good writer, and to continue my education and to continue my professional development. So when I got to the University of Rhode Island, Carol Garber, Dr. Carol Garber, who's now at Columbia, but was at Brown University and taught classes at the University of Rhode Island, really took an interest in me. And as you know, Carol is a past president as well. And just a wonderful person, a wonderful leader, and a wonderful mentor who also encouraged me to pursue professional development. She thought it was a great idea to join ACSM as well, and was really a great mentor for me at ACSM. And then, as you mentioned, Larry Garber, I made them the same person, Larry Armstrong. Larry Armstrong was my mentor at the University of Connecticut. And he was tougher. He was much tougher. He wasn't as much of a nurturer as somebody who would give you tough love and make sure that you could stand the test of time and stand the rigor of academia. And he made me a really strong scientist. He made me really great at inquiry and criticism and understanding that you have to ask the tough questions to get the best outcomes, and also was very supportive of our involvement in ACSM.
As a professional, was there anyone who was instrumental in your career development, and in particular from a diversity standpoint? For example, I believe you had been a member for ACSM for a number of years, and it might have even been at a national ACSM meeting in a hotel elevator where you met some of the leaders of ACSM. Can you please just talk a little bit about that and the importance of what it led to?
Sure. So in that year, annual meeting was in Indianapolis, and my husband was the executive director of the Black Coaches Association, which is also headquartered in Indianapolis. And I was coming from, most of the Black coaches are men. There are some women, but the majority of them were men. And so we would always have a wives' luncheon. And I was coming from that. And I got in the elevator at the Hyatt, and Robert Carter, who's also a fellow of the American College of Sports Medicine, introduced me to Bob Salas and Bill Roberts. And they said, Keith, we're going to have a meeting with Floyd Keith. Are you related? And I said, yes, that's my husband. And they said, oh, you should come. So I did, and they were talking about how ACSM and the Black Coaches Association can partner, and I just didn't see a good fit. The Black Coaches Association has coaches and athletic directors. We have scientists and physicians, and while we are very interested in sports, I just didn't see how those two things would come together. And I started talking about some ideas that I had about diversity, equity, inclusion, and increasing the diversity within the college. And they liked what I had to say. And Bill invited me to sit at his table. He was going to become president-elect that night. And so, or the next night, sorry. And so I went to the banquet, and I sat at his table, and I saw firsthand most of the people in the room were white. And the only other Black people I could see were Larry Kenney's children. And Larry was about to become past president. And as you know, Larry has 3 adopted Black children. And Larry got on the stage to make his speech, and he said, I would like my children to believe that they could be president of ACSM, even though they're Black. And I thought, I could be president of ACSM, even though I'm Black. And but I thought it's far away. This is something that could happen many, many years in the future when I'm old and gray. And then Bill, the next annual meeting was in Denver, and Bill took me around, introduced me to everybody he knew, took me to invitation-only receptions, took me to committee meetings, and just helped me understand the inner workings of ACSM and helped me build my external network of ACSM members. And then I sat with him at the banquet that Friday, and I thought, this is what everybody needs. Everybody needs a Bill Roberts. And I went back to Indianapolis, and I went back to the National Center under his instruction, and we brainstormed about what we should do. And the result was the Leadership and Diversity Training Program from that elevator ride.
Can you just talk a little bit about that program?
Sure. So in the Leadership and Diversity Training Program, there are 3 levels. The first level is for master level graduate students. The second level is for professional students, so Ph.D., M.D., D.O., PT, you name it. And then the third level is for faculty or clinicians. And these, it's an application-based program. We take 20 applicants a year. They get matched with a mentor. The mentor is a fellow, and the mentor really does everything that Bill Roberts did for me. They meet the participant, they take them around to committee meetings and receptions, and they introduce them to their inner circle of colleagues so that the participants can grow their network. And ACSM has funding to pay for their participation. So their travel, the meeting registration is comped, and then they can travel to see their mentor for one time a year, either at their regional chapter meeting or at their mentor's clinic or lab, whatever they want to do.
I think it's a fantastic program, and I'm happy to be a part of it. For the time I was a mentor to one of my students, I thought it was absolutely fantastic to be a part of. So past President Kenny was the 47th president of ACSM. You are the 64th president of ACSM. So from the time he had his speech at the banquet, it's been 17 presidents, if you will, to when you became president. Can you just share with us a little bit about how ACSM has approached diversity over the past 10, 20, 30, 40 years?
So I can speak to the 10 and 20 years and say it's great. I can even go as high as 30 years and say I've been a member for, I believe, 28 years, so pretty close to 30 years. I will say in the beginning, it was horrible. It really was. And there was no interest in diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think it was just probably a sign of the times. When ACSM started in the 60s, this just really wasn't a thing, and it was a pretty white organization. I will say it changed, and it changed with leadership. It changed with presidents. And I will say presidents like Barb Ainsworth and Larry Kenney and Larry Armstrong and Carol Garber and Walt Thompson worked really hard to make sure diversity, equity, and inclusion was at the forefront of their work with ACSM, and really intentionally invited members of underrepresented minority groups to serve in a capacity that would make them leaders of the college, myself included.
I think that just speaks volumes about what words can mean. As when President Kennedy spoke about wanting his children maybe to be able to be president of the organization, and for someone in the audience to listen to that and hear that and to internalize it and say, you know what, I think I can do this. Sometimes I think change, it only takes a small step for big things to occur. And that's a great story. So thank you for sharing it with us. How has ACSM membership been valuable to your career? And obviously you've reached the highest level within ACSM, so we know it has been valuable. But just in your own words, I was hopeful that you could share what it means to be a member of ACSM to you.
Well, I think being a member of ACSM means that I've got 50,000 members and certified professionals who have my back. And it's really nice that if I have a question, that I have professionals, scientists, clinicians all over the world that I can send an email or call and ask my question about my professional problem. If I'm doing a research study and we've run into a challenge, I have a group of people where I can say, I'm having this challenge, can you help me? Or I want to write this paper, do you care to be a co-author? Or I think this paper should be written, are you interested in writing it? And to have such a large network of people that you can rely on to help you with your professional activities is invaluable. I would also say that ACSM offers the best education. And so conferences like the International Health and Fitness Summit are so great for me because I can go, I don't teach fitness classes anymore, but I can go to the summit and listen to what's going on in the fitness industry and take that information back to my students so that they have the most cutting edge information. Even though textbooks are great, textbooks take years to publish. And so by the time we get a textbook in our hands, the information could have changed. Our professional education through ACSM helps us know this is still the same or it's evolved over time. And that's also invaluable. And in this virtual environment and the increase in educational offerings from ACSM, to be able to have access to those is so wonderful for me and for my students.
How challenging has it been for you to navigate to where you are in your career at this point? And I know at times it might be hard for a young student or a young professional to think about where they may be in 20 or 30 years. But do you have any advice for future professionals in helping them navigate their career?
Yeah, so it is challenging. And if getting a Ph.D. and being a professor at a university was easy, there'd be a lot more people doing it. So it is a lot of hard work. There are obstacles along the way. And I just tell my students and my junior faculty colleagues, show yourself some grace, because I hear people say the imposter syndrome, and I say no such thing as the imposter syndrome. You did it, and so you get credit. You're here because you worked really hard. And so it is really important to continue to work really hard. And then as you see yourself 30 years down the line, I wasn't looking 30 years down the line. I was looking at problems that I saw today with ACSM, and diversity, equity, inclusion was one of them 20 years ago. I saw a problem. I saw an opportunity to pursue a solution. I pursued the solution. In that pursuit, I demonstrated great leadership in the opinion of other leaders, and I was invited to serve as a leader. And I would say that's how you do it. You work really hard on something that's very important to you, and you are viewed as a leader, and you're invited to other leadership activities.
So your leadership is about to become past President Keith in no short time. And I look at what ACSM has been able to do as an organization focusing on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and I wonder, in 10 more years, what could we continually do? What should we be sure to do to make sure that we are keeping a proper focus on these very important issues?
Well, we have some guarantees in place. And so one of the things that I did with our administrative council when I was a vice president is to support 3 trustees on the board of trustees whose focus is diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that will be perpetual. So there will always be trustees at the table whose focus as the board makes decisions is on diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's done. The Leadership and Diversity Training Program will continue to exist. There's also a program called Mentoring Women to Fellowship. And we still need mentors all the time. We need people who are in leadership positions, who are fellows, to, when they're tapped to serve as mentors and be good ones. And take pride in developing this young student or faculty member who's trying to pursue leadership. So that's also really important. And then as committee chairs are making recommendations to the president-elect about committee appointments, take a look at your recommendations and say, is this a diverse group of people? And if it is, it's a great recommendation. If it isn't, revisit. And then the last thing I would say is, as you're submitting your symposia or your tutorials or your clinical lectures, take a look at your panel. Is your panel of experts diverse? And if it isn't, seek out a diverse panel so that as we are delivering education to student members or to other professional members, they can see themselves as members of ACSM and join.
So if I am someone who happens to be watching this video in the near future, and I am a young student or a young professional, and I feel real important about these issues, and I would like to get involved, is there anyone that they could reach out to learn more about or find out more information about how they could potentially get involved?
Sure, there are a lot of people they could reach out to. And so the first thing I would recommend is to go to the website and go to the volunteer section of the website that has the list of committees and strategic health initiatives, and volunteer to be on one of those groups. But you can also, there's a Minority Health and Research Special Interest Group, and anybody can join that group at any time. It's really huge. There's over 100 members. And we have the Strategic Health Initiative for Health Equity, and we have Exercise as Medicine for underserved and community health, and we have a Diversity Action Committee. So there are lots of groups of people who are focused on this work, and I would really recommend getting involved with those groups. And if there's a committee, a strategic health initiative, or a special interest group that you see, contact the chair and say, I would like to get involved with your group, so that the chair can nominate them to serve on the committee.
I have two more questions for you, President Keefe. The first one is, what are some of your most memorable moments from your service to ACSM?
That is a tough one. I'm going to say my most memorable moment is I was at the Northland chapter ACSM regional chapter meeting, and I was giving a talk, a lunchtime talk, and I was sitting in the room and I was waiting for the next speaker to finish so that I could prepare to go on stage and get to the podium and give my talk as the people got their lunch. And I got a call. And I could see from the call it was coming from Durham, North Carolina. I knew that President-elect at the time, Bill Krause, lived in Durham, North Carolina. And I knew that the election had closed and that I was going to learn whether or not I would be the 64th president of ACSM. So I hopped up and I went out in the hallway and I had just the most wonderful conversation with Bill as he told me that I'd won. I will say I have another memorable moment that's like parallel. I won't go into it as much, but Liz Joy had to call and tell me that I lost the first time I ran for president. And that also was quite memorable. I think some of my favorite moments of annual meeting, so I would just say in general annual meeting, but every year when I meet the class of the Leadership and Diversity Training Program participants, even when I say it, I just get chills of this room of future leaders and great people. So I think that is probably my favorite. And then I would say the last is when I became a fellow and Barbara Drinkwater decided to be in the picture with me and the other presidents. And she told me, you're going to be ACSM president one day.
That is fantastic. The last question I have of this ACSM Distinguished Leaders in Sports Medicine Exercise Science series with a focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion is, what advice would you have for future leaders of ACSM, particularly on these issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Well, this year we used the ACSM platform to talk about social justice issues, and that had never been done before. So we addressed Black Lives Matter. We addressed the violence against Asian Americans. We addressed the pandemic. And my advice would be to not be afraid to use your platform to address social justice issues because we have a large voice and we have a lot of followers and they listen to us. And so I would recommend to leaders to use the platform for issues that are related to exercise science, physical activity, sports medicine, but also public health issues. And social justice is a public health issue.
Well, on behalf of the American College of Sports Medicine, President Keith, I would just like to extend my gratitude to you for your leadership that you have given us during this pandemic year and beyond, and hopefully many years into the future. We hope your leadership will still be with us.
Well, Sean, thank you for capturing the history of the American College of Sports Medicine. Thank you for being a decades-long friend. And thank you, and thank all of the members and leaders and certified professionals of the American College of Sports Medicine for trusting me to lead the college for the 2020-2021 year.
Thank you.